Well, if you noticed online, I have a couple of active cases ongoing in federal court. So let me just tell you briefly what's going on, and I can also show you some of the evidence. But it's on many different YouTube websites as well. But I think, fundamentally what the underlying problem is that if you notice, if you really, listen to the news and you regularly hear stories about, people like police officers or teachers doing something wrong, and then of course the people from their group, they come out and say, well, they're no different than anybody else. They're just a subset of the general population. So they're just human. So I'm not really talking about something like police brutality. I'm talking about something like when a police officer goes out and kills the boyfriend of his ex, So that's the kind of thing I'm talking about. But very interestingly, at least in the Washington, D.C. area and in Maryland, even though there are a lot more, healthcare professionals than teachers and police officers combined, you don't hear about any of the cases of wrongdoing by these people. So, what are you telling me? These are perfect little angels? They are not human like the rest of us? They don't commit crimes? So obviously what's going on is there's a pretty good setup where they get to cover up all their crimes. And the primary reason it happens is because the DC region is very unique. For one thing, it's very rich. At the same time, when you look at the local elected officials, in this area, there's really only one giant industry. Now, of course, we know the federal government is kind of the one giant industry, but they don't really have anything to do with the local governments, right? So for the local government, the only giant local industry is really the healthcare industry. And so, when someone thinks about lobbying the federal government, well, you have so many different corporations who want to lobby the federal government. But when you come to the local level in this area, there's only one industry in town, which is the healthcare. And then on top of that, you only have two large healthcare entities, which are Inova and Sklar. So, and then when you combine that with Inova and Sklar are regional, they're not a national corporation, so they don't have to go and they don't have to go and get favors from elected officials in California, as other large corporations have to do. So basically, it's kind of one-to-one. You really have the local elected officials and these two large healthcare entities basically, having a one-to-one relationship. And so what happens is, anytime there's any kind of unlawful acts, wrongdoing, I'm not talking about medical malpractice, these local governments, they help these people cover up. So, and we can see this right from how Inova starts out. The Fairfax County government has a special kind of bonds. You know how the local municipalities, they issue bonds. They're called municipal bonds. Okay, so, well, in every other place in the U.S., they used to have a bond called the the Industrial Development Bond, and And so those got replaced by the word economic development bond. And then they also have this healthcare development bond. So you can kind of figure out what they're supposed to be for. Right. So, but in Fairfax County, they have an economic development bond, but they don't have a healthcare development bond. What they have done is they have taken the healthcare, what they have done is they have used the name industrial. So you can see, it just smells really bad. They have used the name industrial development bond, but when you look at what it does is it's a bond exclusively for Inova. So you think, what does Inova, a healthcare entity, have to do with industrial development? Nothing. It's just a way to pass money off to them. So, and then on top of that, this industrial development bond, it only raises money for Inova. It doesn't raise money for any other healthcare entity in Fairfax County. And on top of that, it also raises money for Innova's activities outside of Fairfax County. And Inova even has plenty of activities into Montgomery County. You're right. Inova actually runs the heart program at Washington Adventist Hospital. So if you think about it, at Washington Adventist Hospital, they kind of keep it quiet, but the Washington Adventist Hospital heart program is entirely run by Inova. So, and then there's really nothing else at that hospital but a heart program. So essentially they run the entire Washington Adventist Hospital, and they do all this using Fairfax County taxpayer money. And then with the big news coming out of Baltimore these days, there's also something related. What it turns out is there was like a whistleblower type. There was a psychologist a few years ago who complained to the Maryland State's Attorney's Office that she received a solicitation from a psychological services company that was an exclusive contractor to many local police and state agencies in Maryland. And they were supposed to provide psychological evaluation of potential police officers and also, existing police officers who got into trouble for whatever. So what this email solicitation told this psychologist is that she just has to be a licensed psychologist to perform the evaluations. At the same time, for this kind of job, and also with the contract that company had with the state, they actually promise a very specialized type of psychologist, someone who has particular experience with working with police officers, and not just any psychologist. Okay, and then the solicitation email also said that she can finish the evaluation in as little as 15 minutes, but at the same time, the rules basically was that it should take 45 minutes to an hour to do a proper evaluation. And then the solicitation even, because they are so fearless, right, that they can get away with wrongdoing, for some reason, they know they can get away with a lot, so they actually write that she can do the evaluation in 15 minutes and boilerplate the rest. So they actually use the word boilerplate. Now, the word boilerplate is usually used when someone accuses someone else of boilerplating, No one is going to outright come and say, hey, you can go ahead and boilerplate things. But if you know what the meaning of boilerplate is, so you see, if you're supposed to do a 45-minute long evaluation and you do it in 15 minutes, what boilerplating means is basically you just have some templates set up and you just inject them into the into the report. So you can have a 15-minute report, and you can have another 45, you can have another half an hour report, which is the exact same items that you have for every report you do. And so you can make it look like a 45, you can make it look like a 45-minute report when it's really only a 15-minute report. So, well, this psychologist who was, who could be said to be whistleblowing, she complained to the state attorney general's office, and it is an issue of public corruption because it's this public contract which, this contractor is getting all this money, and they're really shortcutting everything. At the same time, it looks like the local governments, they're not so ignorant, you know what I'm saying? So they want all these officers green-lighted through, so they don't want the psych firm to fail their officers anyway. So included one of the things that happened is they had this police officer who was basically herself in and out of the nut house. I mean, like literally, she's been in and out of the nut house while she's the police officer, and the psych firm approves her to be reinstated as the police officer, and within like a week, she goes and shoots herself. Okay, so she commits suicide. So I guess they're suing this firm as well. So you can kind of see how, and then we can kind of see, and see, what I really noticed how the state attorney general's office, who had jurisdiction, the state attorney general is supposed to handle this matter, but instead the state attorney general's office referred the psychologist to the psychologist state board. I think that's something just like a medical board. But like a medical board, they really deal with a doctor's professional standards. It has nothing to do with public corruption and large crimes and such. I mean, those should be taken up by law enforcement. So it looks like the Attorney General's office, I think someone should do a good investigation and find out whether when the Attorney General's office received that whistleblowing complaint, whether the Attorney General's office did more than just kind of passing the buck kind of thing, kind of telling her to take her complaint elsewhere. Did the Attorney General's office also go ahead and tip off the wrongdoers? Because that's what I'm saying is going on. I think we have these high up officials who are actually involved in the wrongdoing. So it's much more than the Maryland Attorney General's office just telling her, oh, don't bother us, go take it to this other agency. No, I think they know exactly what's going on. They're helping to cover it up. And then they also go and tip off the wrongdoers. So I think they're working hand in hand with the wrongdoers. And now all these local agencies and governments have these kind of sham investigations into this matter. I'm not talking about the actual Freddie Gray case. I'm talking about this psychology services firm. And it's very clear the corruption is not just with this firm, but it's also with the local and state government, and it's going right up to the top. Obviously, it's going to the state attorney general's office, who's had this complaint and who's intentionally done nothing and misled the person who made the complaint to go somewhere else instead. And so anyway, the attorney that's representing this psych services firm, so I guess these, they have these sham kind of things where they make it look like something is happening, So I think what happens is the defense attorney or would-be defense attorney who's, helping that psych services firm, they're actually all together very much in cahoots with the state agencies. So they kind of run the sham public thing where they make it look like something is going on, but they are really all in it together. So I'll show you this, exactly what happened. This same attorney also represented somebody else, and then that somebody else actually has a direct connection to my matter. And so that's why I'm going to get at it this way. I'll just show you what's going on. Okay, so there was this guy who was defrauding doctors and veterinarians throughout the country. And he was based out of Howard County. And so when these doctors and veterinarians, they tried to get the Howard County police and the local prosecutor there to file charges against this guy, they just wouldn't do it. Because obviously somebody was, even though this was just someone so little and someone, doing all these frauds and not like a CEO of some large healthcare company or whatever, they had the right connections to make sure that there was no investigation, even though, because usually everyone recognizes that police and prosecutors, they don't take up all the cases that come to them. But at the same time, when you got the victims of the crime, they're like veterinarians and doctors, and they're more than willing to come forward and participate in the process. The police and the prosecutor should at least start an investigation. But apparently somebody's been pulling the strings and getting favors done for this guy. And it so happened that one of the veterinarians he defrauded is also a captain in the U.S. Army Reserve, and he also has some working relationships with other police agencies in other parts of the country. So he was able to. So this individual who was defrauded in Michigan, he was able to. Now he's like in the hinterlands of the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, and he was able to convince his small town police department to conduct an investigation into the crime, at least to the extent that it occurred in Michigan. So, and at least, had that investigation and prosecution gone forward, the person who committed those crimes, he could have at least received some punishment, some jail. They could have taken him from Maryland and had him in jail in Michigan for at least a year, and that would have done something. But what happened is, incredibly, the Howard County prosecutors and police who were not getting involved, because obviously someone was pulling favors, all of a sudden, when it looks like this dirtbag is going to get some punishment in Michigan, to save his skin, it looks like, the Howard County prosecutor and the police department decided to take up the case in Howard County. Now, I know why they did it. They did it so that they can conduct the investigation and trial in Howard County, and they could do the end result which happened, which is they gave him a slap on the wrist. Right, because although the grand jury indicted him, and it was very clear if he went to trial in Howard County, he would have been getting a big, long prison sentence. But the prosecutor made a plea deal, which is obviously, and you can see what's going on, the same prosecutor who did not want to charge initially, and now to spoil, right, just so they can spoil the case which was going on in Michigan. Since they said they don't want to charge, what's the problem? They should have let the police and prosecutors in Michigan handle the matter. But then it looks like the same people who pull the favors and pull the strings of our local officials here, they got them to prosecute just so they can give him a slap on the wrist kind of thing. You know what I'm saying? So really he got nothing. He only had to pay some minimal level of restitution, which was, the restitution was the actual money that he received. It was not, now these veterinarians and doctors, their losses were much bigger. You know, if you were defrauded out of $5,000 because of some medical equipment which you did not receive, your actual loss is a lot more, because because all the time and effort you spend trying to work the matter out, and also, since you didn't have access to the equipment, you lost all that business, right? So it's actually, when the guy had to pay about $100,000 in restitution, that really wasn't the true amount that he should have been paying in restitution. And also, which is incredible, is the same attorney who represents this psych services firm also represented this guy, and the attorney's name is, his name is Bergman. Last name is Bergman. I think it's like Richard G. Bergman. Okay, Richard G. Bergman, practicing out of Baltimore. Okay, so he's the same attorney now, and so this attorney kind of, it looks like, again, we have kind of like this sham show trial like thing where this attorney, there was kind of like a little news story going on with like a small news service, and it was not the prosecutor who was talking to the news reporters. It was the defense attorney for this guy who was actually also stating the prosecutor's statements to the news reporters. So, which is very odd. Why is the defense attorney why is the defense attorney serving as a spokesperson for the prosecutor of the same case, which really goes back to, they're all in it together. It's kind of just like a show trial. And the point I made was, this guy was supposed to go to jail for a long time in Michigan. And to spoil that, they went ahead and had the trial in Harvard County. And they make up all these lies about this guy. They said he doesn't have any money to pay restitution, which was true. So he had to come up with, where did he get this money, this $100,000 he paid in restitution? Where did he get this money? There's probably another $150,000 that he paid in lawyer's fees. So he had $100,000 in restitution and $150,000 in lawyer's fees, which is $250,000 from a person who didn't have any money. So who gave him all this money? And the prosecutor in Maryland didn't make any inquiry about where the money came from. You really can't. If you go rob a bank, if you say you don't have the money to pay back what you robbed from the bank, and all of a sudden you're able to pay it back, and you're able to hire an expensive attorney, where is that money coming from? And really, how can you have something called restitution when it's actually coming from somebody else, or it's possibly coming from the fruits of other crimes? You can't really accept as restitution money which comes from the fruits of other crimes. It has to be genuinely that person's money. Right, exactly. So